friends at the Ronald McDonald House. My name is Miss Elizabeth, and I'm so excited to be here today to do the Art of the Scientist class with you, where we mix science and art. Before we begin, let's sing our hello song. Can you move your hands side to side like this? Let's all wave our hands and say hello, hello. Let's all wave our hands and say hello, hello. I'm so happy to be with you. I can't wait to see what we'll do. Let's all wave our hands and say hello, hello. Hello, scientists. Are you ready to learn about chemical reactions? Today we're going to create some art using the science of chemical reactions. What happens when two things come together to form something new? Are you ready to get started? Okay, scientists, are you ready for a chemical reaction? Chemical reactions occur when we mix two substances together to form a new substance. And today, those two substances are vinegar, which I put in this cup, and baking soda, which I put in this cup. And before we start, I'm just going to add a little food coloring to this vinegar so you can see what happens a little clearer. I'm adding green. Matches my shirt today. So we have our green vinegar and our baking soda. So let's be scientists. Scientists always start off with a question. Today's question is, what will happen when we mix vinegar with baking soda? And once scientists have a question, they start to make guesses, to make up the answer. It doesn't have to be right or wrong, it's just a scientist's guess. They call that a hypothesis. Can you say that? A hypothesis. It's a scientist's guess. It may be right, it may be wrong. That's okay. Any prediction or guess is fine when trying to figure out the answer to our question. So now it's your turn. Our question is, what will happen when we mix our vinegar and our baking soda? Do you have a hypothesis or a guess? Well, let's think about it together. We have our liquid vinegar and our powder baking soda. Maybe when we put our powder in the liquid, it'll melt or dissolve. Our vinegar is green and our baking soda is white. Maybe it'll change color. What do you think? What's your hypothesis? Have you ever used vinegar and baking soda before? Do you know what's about to happen? Well, let's take a guess. So we have our question. What's going to happen when we mix our vinegar and our baking soda? And then we have our hypothesis, our guesses. We have quite a few guesses about what might happen. Now it's time for the experiment. It's time to test our hypothesis to see if those guesses are correct. Are you ready to do our experiment? I have a dropper here. I love droppers. They're great for our finger muscles, our fine motor skills. If you don't have a dropper, you can just pour little drops of vinegar into your baking soda, but that's the key, my friends. We want to keep it little. For now, we don't know what's about to happen, so we ease into it. Are you ready to test our hypothesis to see if we can answer our question? What's going to happen when we mix vinegar with baking soda? I'm going to put my dropper in. I have it pinched, and I'm going to let go so it slurps it up like a straw. And let's add a few little drops to our baking soda. Here we go. Did anything happen? Did anything happen to your baking soda? Well, mine did change color. It did turn green, so one of those guesses was correct. But something else happened. Little bubbles started to form, and if you listen really carefully, you could hear the fizzing. Should we do it again? Let's do some little drops again. Do you see all those drops turning into bubbles? Did you guess that would happen? Was that your hypothesis? Well, my friends, this is what we call an acid-base chemical reaction. When our acid, which is vinegar, and our base, which is our baking soda, come together, a new substance forms, the gas bubbles we see. Now the science behind that is that our acid is a very friendly acid, and it donates protons or gives protons, positively charged ions, to our base. What that means is it gives a little bit of itself to the baking soda so that something new can form. In this case, it's carbon dioxide or gas bubbles that we see bubbling up. When our acid and our base come together, they make carbon dioxide gas bubbles. Are you ready to do it again? Let's do it. Do you see the bubbles? I love the sound of the fizzing. So there you have it, my friends. Our question was, what will happen when you mix an vinegar acid with a base baking soda? We made our guesses, our hypothesis, and then we tested it with our experiment, and we learned that a new substance, carbon dioxide, is formed when we mix our acid vinegar with our base of baking soda. But sometimes after a scientist does an experiment once, they decide to change it a little bit. So what do you say? Should we change it? We know that when our vinegar and our baking soda come together, it makes bubbles. But those are really tiny drops of vinegar. So my next question for my scientists, what do you think will happen when we add a lot of vinegar to our baking soda? Can you use the information we learned to come up with a new guess or a new hypothesis? Remember, we learned that when our vinegar and our baking soda come together, there are air bubbles that are formed. Those are little drops. So what do you think will happen? What's your hypothesis when we add big drops of vinegar to our baking soda? Do you have a guess? Do you have a hypothesis? All right, there's our question. What will happen when we add big drops of vinegar to baking soda? Some of my friends made a guess or hypothesis. Do you think it will be bigger bubbles? Maybe. Let's conduct our experiment to see if our hypothesis is correct. Here we go. Now, my friends, you may want to have some paper towels nearby because it might get a little messy. Are you ready? On the count of 3, we'll pour it in and see what happens when we add a lot of vinegar to our baking soda. Here goes. 1, 2, 3. Whoa! Did you see that? What happened to yours? Did it overflow like mine did? Was that your hypothesis, that it would be a bigger explosion of bubbles? Well, that is true. The more vinegar we have, the more bubbles we form, because our vinegar is our acid sharing more bubbles or more protons with our baking soda, creating our carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide was bubbling up and bubbling up until it overflowed. Should we do it one more time? Here we go. 3, 2, 1. I could play with vinegar and baking soda all day. I just love vinegar and baking soda experiments about chemical reactions. And so now that we have our science information about what will happen when we mix vinegar and baking soda, are you ready to transform it into an art project? Let's make some paint together and see if we can come up with our hypothesis as we create our paintings. Now that we know the science of chemical reactions, it's time for us to make our fizzy paint. We'll need some water and some baking soda. So I'm using 1, 2, 3 cups today. I'm going to make 3 different colored paints. Are you ready to get started? We'll need 1 tablespoon of water in each of these cups. 1, 1, and 1. Now, does my water have a color? Not yet, right? It's clear. So let's add our colors before we finish off our fizzy paint. We want to make a colorful picture together. And today I'm going to make paint that's primary colors. Primary colors are the 3 main colors to which all other colors can be made. The first primary color is this one right here. Do you know what that is? It's the color of a stop sign. It's the color of strawberries, fire trucks, the color red. So I'm going to add a few red drops to my first glass of water. The next primary color is the color of the sun and of lemons and bananas. You know what that is? That's yellow. I'm going to add 1 drop of yellow. Oops, 2. And the last primary color is this one right here. The color of the sky and Cookie Monster. Do you know what that is? It's the color blue. So I'm going to add a few drops of blue to my water. Now we have the 3 primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. The primary colors are the colors that can mix together to make all other colors. So now that we have our colors, we have to finish mixing our paint. We need to add our baking soda. We had 1 tablespoon of water, and now I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of baking soda. This is what they call a 2-to-1 ratio recipe. 2 parts baking soda to 1 part of water. Now I will tell you, sometimes we need to add a little bit of baking soda or a little bit extra water because actually the food coloring can sometimes change the properties. So roughly 2 tablespoons of baking soda to 1 tablespoon of water, and then we'll see what we get. Here we go. 1, 2. Let's do this. 1, 2, and last up, our blue. 1 and 2. Then it's time for us to mix it up and see if we have the right consistency. Do you know what the consistency means? It means it's the right texture or right material for us to begin painting with. So I think I might need to add a little more baking soda or a little bit more water to some of these. Like this one right here is a little bit too runny. So I'm probably going to add a little more baking soda to that one. This yellow one here is looking pretty good. This is kind of what we want it to look like, my friends. A little bit of a thicker water. Just like that. Last up, let's check out our blue. Ooh, our blue right here. If I was Goldilocks, I would say that this blue is just right. This right here is the perfect consistency for our paint. See how it's a little bit thicker? It's a little bit thicker. So I'm just going to scoop in a little bit more baking soda into my red and mix it up and see if we can get it to that Goldilocks just right texture or consistency. It's amazing how the food coloring we use can change how much baking soda we need. This one looks good now. There we go. This is just right. And let's see, is our yellow good? Yep, our yellow came out pretty good too. So now that we have all of our colors, let's paint a picture together. This is the fun part, my friends. This is the part where you get to be creative and make whatever you like. These projects are what we call process-oriented projects. Do you know what that means? It means it's all about the process of creating art. It's not so much about the product or what it looks like. We're just experimenting together like scientists do. So I have my paper and I have some paintbrushes, some big and some small. And I'm going to start off just by drawing anything I like. It's a sunny day today, so I think maybe I'll draw a sun and maybe some clouds. What are you going to draw? You can draw circles or squares or lines. Anything goes. Because in a few minutes, after we've painted with our fizzy paint, we're going to conduct our experiment. I wonder if you can take a guess as to what we might be adding to our fizzy paint. Here's my circle. The circle on my paper goes round and round, round and round, round and round. The circle on my paper goes round and round. Then I make it stop. The lines on my paper go wiggle, 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 wiggle. The lines on my paper go wiggle, 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 and then I have them stop. I'm using yellow, the color of the sun. And now I'm going to add some other colors. I'm actually going to use a different paintbrush for each of my colors because I have a lot of paintbrushes. But if you don't, you could always wash off your paintbrush between colors. Now I'm adding some red lines. Just, oops. It's okay if it spills a little bit in there. Might make something new. My red and my yellow are mixing together. Wonder what might happen. I just love sunny days. But the rain is important too. All of the weather is so important. And last up, I'm going to add some blue to my picture. I'm just going to add some blue. Maybe I'll do some blue dots. Again, I'm just having some fun playing with my paint that we made together. Doesn't have to look like anything. It's just some designs because we're going to have some science fun with it. It's the art of the scientist, and so we're going to add something to our paint. We're going to add something that will cause a chemical reaction. Do you remember what we used earlier? What we put with our baking soda? That's right, my friends. It's time for us to add some vinegar to our paper. Now, what do you think is going to happen? Here we go, scientists. We're starting with our question. We made some paint out of baking soda and water and food coloring. And now we're going to be adding some vinegar drops to our painting. What do you think is going to happen? Do you have a guess or hypothesis? Do you remember what we learned earlier? Lots of times scientists will use the information they learned to make predictions about new experiments and new questions. So what do you think? Should we give it a try? Let's see what happens. Going to add a few drops. 3, 2, 1. What do you see, my friends? Our paint is fizzing. It's fizzy paint. Do you know why our paint is fizzing? It's because it's made with baking soda. Our baking soda in our paint is interacting with our vinegar, and it's creating a chemical reaction. You can use big drops, you can use little drops, anything goes. If you have a spray bottle, that's a lot of fun too. Watch this. Do you hear it fizzing? I just love the sound of the fizzy paint. And hey, something's going on here, my friends. I'm starting to see some new colors forming. Like right here. When our red and our yellow came together, they made a new color. Do you know what they made? That looks orange. That's because red and yellow are primary colors. And remember, we said when the primary colors come together, they can make new colors. So, do you want to try something else, like scientists? Let's change it. Do you have another piece of paper? Let's move this paper out of the way, and if you need to, you can use a paper towel to soak up some of the vinegar that might be left over. Once this dries, your painting will be completely dry, but I will warn you that the colors won't be as vibrant. They get much lighter due to the playing with the vinegar. I'm actually going to now see what happens when we put our paints really, really close together, like a rainbow. What do you say? Do you want to do a rainbow with me and see if we can make some new colors with our primary colors when we add our vinegar? Let's try it together. This time I'm going to use my bigger paintbrushes for all of my colors. Are you ready? I'm going to start with red on one side, and I'm just going to add my colors. Red, yellow. You can also use a spoon to put some paint on if you find your paint is really thick. And blue. I'm putting my paints really close together because I noticed that when we did the vinegar before, some of our paints joined to make new colors when they were close together. So I want to see what happens when we keep our paint really close together. What do you think? Do you have any predictions of what might happen when we add our vinegar to this picture? We have our primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. Did you ever see what colors are made when you mix primary colors? Do you have any guesses of what might happen when our red touches our yellow, or our yellow touches our blue, or blue touches our red? I bet you we can make some new colors. What do you think? What do you predict? What will happen when our red and our yellow come together? Do you have a hypothesis or a guess? Well, let's add the vinegar and see what happens when our red and our yellow mix on our paper. I love all these bubbles. I see something happening here, my friends. Do you see what new colors we're getting? Red and yellow makes orange, that's right. Now we're adding some vinegar to where my yellow and my blue come together. Do you have a guess of what color those make? When our yellow and our blue come together, it makes green. Green like the grass and broccoli. Last up, let's see what happens when we put the vinegar near our blue and red. Do you see any new color forming? I sure do. Purple. This kind of reminds me of tie-dye, my friends. Have you ever tried to do tie-dye? Tie-dye, when the colors run and blend into each other. Keep going, keep playing. What happens when you put more baking soda in your paint to make a thicker paint? What happens when you put more vinegar on your paper? What happens if you mix your food coloring in your water before you add your baking soda? There are so many ways that, like scientists, you can change it and make something new. Let's get ready to wrap up. I had so much fun learning about chemical reactions with you today. We talked about acid-base chemical reactions using baking soda and vinegar. Keep the fun going. Play with baking soda and vinegar and see what happens. We also made some paint and mixed new colors. Maybe you can have some fun with colors today. You can go on a color hunt or make your own color wheel by mixing the primary colors of red, yellow, and blue to see what new colors you can make. It's always fun to explore and to ask questions, come up with guesses or hypotheses. I just love learning with all of you. I can't wait to see you again soon. Bye for now.